Welcome to whoever just joined live via YouTube. Thank you everyone so much for joining in. So, what can we say about Bruno Groening? He completely baffles my mind, and Bruno Groening never read a book all the way through in his entire life. He didn't have, that I'm aware of, he didn't have a guru or a spiritual teacher. He didn't go to healing and awakening sessions. As a little child, he had a profound connection to God. And even as a very small child, his healing abilities were beginning to become apparent. I don't know when the first healing that happened through Bruno Groening was. And so here's a being who has profound abilities, a profound wealth of knowledge, and yet he didn't read a book. I'm sure he read pages here and there, but he never read a book all the way through, and he wasn't taught this. He just knew it. And ultimately, that's what I believe. On this path that we're all after is, yes, we study Bruno's teachings and probably study other spiritual things. And ultimately, what Bruno is, I believe, leading us towards, and certainly in his teachings pointing towards, is for us to have a direct connection to God and a direct knowing. Now, direct knowing is very different than, for example, I can tell you all these things that Bruno said because I've read them in books. But there's another type, so I'm calling that knowledge. But there's a knowing, and that's what we're after. For example, a knowing that that's very true and very real for me on this path, something that I know in the depths of my bones, is that there is a force, a power, an energy for which no problem is insolvable. Now, that started off as knowledge for me. I read it. I read that Bruno, or more accurately, I heard people saying that Bruno Groening said it. And then I read it, that Bruno said it, and I sat with it. And then I started to experience it in my own body. So I don't need to lean on Bruno Groening's teaching anymore. That's a fact for me. That's something I know in my direct experience. And so that's my sense of this path that we're on, is that, Bruno teaches us, first of all, Bruno teaches us things to do. Tuning in, Einstellen, striving to have deeper faith, convincing ourselves of what's true. And then, there are different parts of the teaching, and then at a certain point we come to know. Now I'm no guru. I'm not saying my faith is perfect, that I don't doubt sometimes, that sometimes, when faced with a problem, I don't instantly go to faith and trust. I'm a work in progress like all of us. And spiritual healing is a fact for me. It's not a hypothesis. In a sense, it's not even a belief anymore. So that's what we're after. And how does that come about? Well, of course, it's going to look a little different for each person. And Bruno Groening said, I have to paraphrase here because I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but that being connected to God is the ultimate teaching. And in my own experience, it's the ultimate teacher to literally just tune in and feel the presence of God and let things be revealed. And I experienced this so profoundly when I first found Bruno's teaching. I kind of put aside other things for a while. And then, I was tuning in many, many hours every day. I was very devoted, working on reclaiming that devotion. And then I picked up a spiritual book that I'd been looking at for, I don't know, 15 years. And I hadn't been thinking about it at all. I hadn't gone to any events, but the book suddenly made sense. I finally understood it. So, how is that possible? Well, I don't know exactly what happened. Was ignorance removed? Was insight brought in? I don't know. I just know that Bruno is correct. That connecting to God is in a sense the whole teaching. And then from that connection, things unfold, we're guided, things are revealed, ignorance is removed, healings happen. But it all begins and ends with being connected to God. It reminds me in Ayurveda, Indian medicine, they say love is the means and the end. And so what that's pointing to is that cultivating love is the means to find God. And then love is actually the end goal. So it's this funny little paradox that we pick a path. Bruno spoke of God, but he spoke of love, but he emphasized. Welcome to the person who just joined in via YouTube. Bruno spoke about love, but he emphasized faith and he emphasized connection with God more, at least in the writings I've seen. And so it's kind of like faith and connection to God. And in this case, we'll just talk about connection to God. It's the means that leads us. It's the path we take to God on this path, being connected to God. And then at the end of the path, and again, I'm not there yet, but then my sense is what we're going to discover is just never ending connection to God. So it's very beautiful. We're getting to experience, it's like we're getting to have a little taste of eternity before we fully enter or realize eternity. It's like we get a little taste of salvation before we're fully saved. It's very beautiful that the means, that the path maybe make it more clearly is the path. The path we're walking on ends up being the destination that we thought we were walking on this path to get us to a destination, and in some sense we are. And the path itself, the path of connecting to God, ends up being the very goal itself. And in another way, it also leads us to that goal. So that's a lot of words. So let's do it. Let's seek that direct connection with God. Let's seek that wholeness, which ultimately, I believe that's what we all ultimately want, is that peaceful sense of wholeness that never ends. So if you haven't already, please begin to observe your body with the intention, the will, to take in the good energy, to receive the divine signal, to connect. I'll say a little prayer. Beloved Maker, our dear friend Bruno, please, please guide this time together. Please sanctify it, bless it. Please sanctify and bless us. Please, good reception for each one of us here. Please, may each person directly feel the presence of God. Each person here be deeply, intimately connected, united, joined with God and experience that and feel that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we'll spend some time in silence. Tuning in, taking in, taking in what God is sending. Think of it as an active reception. We're not just sitting here passive doing nothing. We're observing the body with the intention to receive the good. Really taking in what's good and true and letting it wash away, letting this goodness wash away, take away, unravel everything not good. Trust and trusting and deepening our trust. If any of us have questions about anything, let's ask that question. Ask it inwardly and then see. See if by the end of the community hour a question and answer hasn't come. So thank you everyone for joining in. Um, Bruno Groening, uh, of himself, he said, God is my life and my fight is with evil. Now, the first one isn't so surprising to hear from Bruno Groening. God is my life. In fact, Bruno said there is no life without God. And so, the temptation is for us to try to imitate Bruno. Like, oh, Bruno Groening said God is his life, so I'm just going to say God is my life. But this isn't about just saying things. But it does raise the question for we can each ask. How central is God to my life? I mean, that's a good place to start. Or we can just ask, is God my life? Um, I don't live there moment by moment, but there are some minutes, some hours, some days where it's been a while since there's been a whole day like that. But there are some hours where it's just I feel connected to God and guided by God, and that's my focus, even as I go about and do other things. So I believe I have a sense of what Bruno Groening's talking about, and I think we all have a sense. We've all had um, moments, minutes, hopefully hours, hopefully day or days, where that's our primary focus. Now, what I'm talking about doesn't mean where we're reading religious or spiritual books all day. What I'm talking about is that feeling of connection and that feeling guided by God. So that's another way, the goal isn't just to, I don't believe the goal is just to, whenever we have a question or we want to know something, or we have an illness, that we tune in, we feel good, we get healed, and then we just go do our thing. I don't think that's what Christ or Bruno or any great master is calling us to. The German word verbinden, which Bruno used often, can be translated as communion and even union. Union. So I believe that's what Bruno's calling us to, is that ongoing communion with God. To get to the place where that is just a fact for us, that God is our life, that's how we're living. So let's take that in. Let's really sit with that. Now, I like to offer a little disclaimer. I'm not a master. I wish I was. I wish I could sit here. And so what I share is my intellectual understanding of what Bruno taught, mixed in with my experiential understanding. And my hope is, in doing this, is that I offer, that I inspire people to explore and find out for themselves if what Bruno is saying is true. And so please don't take my word for anything. That's that's not what this is about at all. And in the end, I don't believe it's not at all about believing something just because Bruno said it. It's about knowing in the depths of our being. Um, so I'm inviting us to take a look at this statement that Bruno made. God is my life. And um, I think really Bruno's whole teaching is urging all of us to live that way, to live in such a way that we can say that, to not just where it's like, God is my life, like I'm so spiritual, but where it's just a fact. Um, so take a look for yourself. How does that statement resonate for you, not resonate for you, this idea of moment by moment being connected to God and living that way? Um, so tune in and check in and see how that, if that feels true, if that even feels desirable. Really letting thoughts go, giving away the negative ones, and the other ones just letting them pass by or handing them over, coming back to this noticing what you feel. So the other part of that statement that Bruno made, my fight is with evil. Of course, Bruno didn't speak English, so he didn't use the word fight, and I haven't had a chance to look up, I haven't found the German word yet that he used. My assumption is that most German words have multiple meanings that they'll have the meaning like struggle, battle, not in the sense of a physical battle, but an ongoing epic struggle. We'll see. I'll make a video about it once I find that information. But what does it mean to fight evil? Well, certainly doesn't mean engaging in violence with evil. That's not how Bruno Groening lived, nor what he taught. A huge part of my understanding of that, based on my own experience, is this sense of vigilance. And Bruno Groening said that human beings live right in between good and evil, and that evil is constantly trying to pull us off the good path. So part of what it means to me to fight or struggle with evil is to have that vigilance as I go through my day and my life. That first of all, just that there is this force that's trying to pull me, not just off the good path, which it is, but pull me into misery and suffering and despair. And it's tricky. It'd be so easy if, evil just whispered like, hey, I want you to do this thing that's going to harm you, right? Like, like, hey, I want you to, you know, you should get in this, I want you to get in this, I'm just making an example. Like, I want you to get in this relationship because it's going to be really harmful and really damage you. No, evil is like, ooh, this looks like a really good relationship. Or, oh, I need that person. Or, um, oh, well, they're treating me poorly, but I can't make it on my own. Or something like that. Or there's no other options. Or I'm trapped. Or, evil's a liar. That's the long and short of it, is evil is a slick, manipulative liar. And I've fallen for it many, many times in my life. And it starts off small, or it can. Like, let's say we're tired, it's time to go to bed, or it's approaching that. And then we hear this little voice in our mind that says, oh, and we're on the internet, we're on Facebook or on YouTube or whatever, and we hear this little voice like, oh, just 5 more minutes. And then 5 more minutes turns into 15 or 20 minutes, and then we see a video that's disturbing, and then we have trouble to sleeping, and we lose a couple hours of sleep, and then we're tired the next day. So obviously that's not going to destroy your life. And then we don't have a good day, and then maybe we make a few bad decisions, and then we feel stressed about the bad decisions, and then we spend more time on the internet because we don't want to deal with the stress of the bad decisions, and then the pebble can turn into an avalanche. Now that's a little extreme example, but what I want to highlight with it is that evil can start small and grow big very quickly. And that evil is, not only is evil not our friend, not in the human sense of the word, but it really is our enemy. It's really after our destruction and the destruction of this planet, actually, according to Bruno Groening. So when we contemplate that, then we can see how the word fight or struggle is appropriate. can be a little um, tricky because we have so many human connotations of the word fight. But when we really meditate on, there's this thing that's trying to destroy me, and it's a liar, and it's tricky, and it's persistent. Then, then we can begin to see how fight is appropriate, an appropriate word, and we might become vigilant. At a certain point, we get sick and tired of all the evil. And at that point, fight doesn't feel like a burden. It feels, I don't want to say joyful, but it becomes what we want to do. We want the good and we want to say no to evil. So let's reflect on all this a little bit. Reflecting on the word fight, reflecting on evil's ultimate intention, our destruction and the destruction of this planet. And let's really tune in and check in. Do these words of Bruno's resonate? Does my way of putting them in my own words, does that resonate with you? You might have a different way of expressing this idea. as we contemplate fighting, struggling, um, evil, it's very important to be very clear that this is not something that we want to do on our own, that we need God. We need divine help to do this. And check in with yourself. See if that seems, feels, registers as true for you. It's so easy to think we can do it on our own, that we can do life on our own, much less overcome evil. On this path, I think there's certain delusions we have to become aware of and face, and I think that's one of the biggies. Right up there with the idea that God is somehow limited, is the idea that we can do this on our own. So that's a very important thing for us to recognize or realize, whether we can or cannot solve all our problems, live life on our own. Because if we it's very important to know, because how we live our life fundamentally will change if we realize, like, hey, I can solve all my problems. That'll send us in a very certain direction. If we recognize, actually I can't, that sends us in a very different direction. This direction of relying on God versus this direction of seeking to do everything ourselves. Well, it's not that, if you're on this path of relying on God, that like you can't do any self-care, or you can't take supplements, or, you can't exercise. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about our fundamental stance, attitude, orientation of relying on God or relying on ourselves without God. Just being like, I can do this, I can take care of this. Now, it's one thing to say, I can do this, with, with the divine help towards, like, I don't need God, I can take care of this. They're fundamentally different attitudes, and they're fundamentally different ways of life. So let's check in and see where we're at with that. Where do we feel like we fall in terms of relying on God? There might be different phases of our lives where, but it's a very individual question, a very individual process. So let's really tune in and see what feels right for us around that. Someone wrote, "For me, it is better not to deal with evil as it is risky. It is better to concentrate on good." Yes, I'm not talking about dealing with evil. And in fact, Bruno specifically said, don't treat the illness, don't deal with evil. However, Bruno Groening called us to be mindful. In fact, he said, don't ever forget, dear friends, that human beings live right in between good and evil. So thank you for bringing that forward. It's a subtle distinction. We're not trying to treat evil, we're not trying to cure it, and Bruno Groening instructed us to never forget that we live right in between good and evil. And Bruno Groening himself spoke quite a bit about the nature of evil. Um, so there's this idea that there's a very different thing. For example, let's say there's someone who did something I didn't like. If I dwell on it and think, oh, that person hurt me, or oh, I can't believe, for me, that's taking evil in. And that's how I harm myself. On the other hand, reflecting on evil, reflecting on the existence of evil, even reflecting like this, oh, that person hurt me. They must be taking on some evil. Bruno Groening said that the human being is and remains divine. Um, in essence, he said if someone's doing something wrong, it's not them, it's the evil. So if I go out and look at the world with the awareness that evil exists, it gives me a very clear lens to look at the world. So I differentiate, and I believe Bruno Groening did as well. And to be mindful, here's another thing that Bruno called us, to be mindful that there's two kinds of thoughts, and that thoughts come from one of two sources. So it's a very subtle topic, and in fact, I think I'll make a video on it. I would agree with you, concentrate on the good. And this is when I say agree, that what I mean is what Bruno Groening taught us, to focus on the good and be mindful of evil. That's my understanding of what Bruno Groening taught. And I'll make a video on it, and I'll welcome comments and feedbacks, because there's this, I've heard it sort of what do I want to say? In a Bruno Groening culture, like, oh, we can't think about evil. We can't talk about evil. And so I believe that's accurate to a certain extent. Like let's say I have an injured ankle. So I don't want to go around thinking about the injured ankle, telling everyone I can, telling people how I have it, so forth and so on. That's focusing on evil. And according to Bruno Groening, that's harmful. The flip side of that is I don't want to go around thinking, oh, everything's good. And sort of in this fearful sense, like not thinking about the existence of evil. I don't believe that's what Bruno Groening instructed us to do at all. And everyone has to read Bruno's teachings for themselves and meditate on it for themselves. Bruno Groening straight up used the word Satan, and he straight up said that the whole point of this work is to free the soul from Satan's grasp. That's almost a direct. He said Satan is clawing at humanity. So I really believe you're onto something there in saying that yes, our intention has to be to focus on the good. However, to have awareness of the existence of evil doesn't mean we're dealing with evil. It means we know it's out there and we're being vigilant. Again, that's my understanding, and I'll make a video on it. And so the awareness of the power of evil can actually help us to forgive people. I found this to be very powerful. If someone's behaving badly, I don't think they're a bad person anymore. Bruno Groening said, from a spiritual point of view, there are no bad people. But he also let us know that when people take in evil, that then they behave in evil ways. So if someone treats me bad, I can just have the awareness, oh, poor them. They've taken in evil, and they're behaving poorly. I would concur with you. It is very risky to deal with evil. And Bruno Groening himself said it. He said it very clearly. Don't treat the illness, the burden. I never treat evil, he said. So we'll begin to wrap up. I'm going to be having I'm going to be doing one Wednesdays and Sundays, I believe, are going to be my regular days, and I have an email list where I announce those. If you'd like to be on it, it's thehealingcurrent@gmail.com, all one word, thehealingcurrent@gmail.com. So to review a little bit. So Bruno Groening called us to be knowers, not knowers of information, though certainly information can be a step in that direction, but to get to the point where we know things in our own experience and we know it in such a deep level. We can start off, and I gave the example well, actually, this is a great, I don't know how to say this except just to say it. Bruno Groening's teaching that human beings are divine. And when they behave badly, it's because they've taken in evil. And that includes me. When I'm not perfect, sometimes I behave in ways that I later feel bad about. I don't kill people or steal things, but sometimes I say things regret. Sometimes I'm in a hurry. Sometimes I'm not as gentle as I want to be. And so this teaching of Bruno's that the human being is divine, but that we can take on evil. I just know it to be true now. It's not a question for me, it's a fact. So it's not even a fact. I don't know quite how to say it. I'm utterly convinced that that is true. I know it in a way that it's hard to put into words. And so that's, we start off with the information and with Bruno's help and through tuning in, and I would say reflecting on this and also convincing ourselves, which is what Bruno told us to do. Then we come to the point where we know. Sorry, I kind of like to emphasize that, like just bang something on the table, like that we know something to be true. And there's this question of this issue of God being our life and how central in our life is God. Do we even see that as a desirable goal? Bruno Groening called us to a life that's God focused, God centered, where moment by moment we're connected to God and we're being guided by God. There's this question of fighting evil. What did Bruno mean? And of course, Bruno was speaking of himself in that. But he also did speak of that we're all on a journey of freeing ourselves from evil. I think that might be another way to say it is that Bruno called us to, yes, not treat, not dwell, not take in evil, but to understand evil. I think maybe that's a good way to say it, is that Bruno absolutely called us to understand what evil is and that evil exists. Many people deny the existence of evil. One Christian theologian said that's evil's greatest victory, is to get people to deny its existence. So thank you everyone so much for tuning in. Unless I send out an email to the contrary, it'll be Wednesday and Sunday will be the next gathering. And thank you so much for bringing up that point. Yes, this path is not about dealing with evil, treating evil, focusing on evil. And I'll reflect on it more and make a video, and I welcome more feedback because it's a very subtle point. So thanks for bringing it forward. So I'm going to close us out with a final prayer. Dearest Bruno, our beloved Maker, God, thank you so much for the grace of one more day of life. Thank you for this time together. Thank you, our dear friend Bruno, for all your help. You say that you don't heal, God does, and yet you do help. You help us take in this energy and guide us on this path. Please, for each one who attended this meeting and everyone who watches this video, Please help us to become knowers. Please help us to know what's true, to discern for ourselves, so that we don't have to be human listeners, meaning we don't have to listen to other people to find the truth, but we listen to God and we know it. Please help us to put God at the center of our life, moment by moment, and to help us strive for that and want that. Please help us to fight evil and to understand what you meant by that, Bruno. What did you mean by fighting evil and freeing ourselves from evil? Please help us to understand what's best for us in terms of understanding evil and how to deal with it. And as you said, Bruno, to never forget that we live right in between good and evil. So please guide us to have the correct amount of awareness or focus, to not ignore evil, but to not overly focus or get lost in it or become fearful of it. Please, for all the friends of Bruno Groening, we ask for the highest blessing. Let's tune in and ask. Please, for all those on the path of Christ, even those who haven't heard of Bruno Groening or Christ, but yet are walking that path, following the principles that Christ taught and Bruno reminded us of, let's tune in and ask. Please, Bruno, for all those who are on striving for the good in so many different ways, let's tune in and ask. Please, please, Bruno, for all those who've lost their way, all those who feel hopeless. Please, intervention, grace, and mercy. Let's tune in and ask. And please, for this beautiful divine earth, for all that lives here, for everything that lives here, for the earth as a whole. And to do, please show us our part to help that beautiful, beautiful, most glorious day come, which Bruno, you spoke of, when all evil would be removed from this planet and where God's kingdom would be fully restored here. Please help us, as you said, Bruno, to believe in it, to trust in that day, to want the good, and to do our part in helping it to come forward. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining in. You divine creations, divine marvels, you children of God. I hope to see and feel you all very soon. I wish you a very sunny Sunday. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Much love.